Hi friends, Sam here and welcome to Dungeon Brews, the show where I shamelessly shoehorn my favourite things from television shows, movies and video games into Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, normally by homebrewing or providing some gameplay tips that will allow you to capture the feeling, the essence of those media entities for your players to enjoy. This week, what I wanted to do was look at a game which is coming out, that being Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Now, I'm a big fan of Borderlands, 1, and 2, it's literally sat there on a plate begging for me to do something about it. It is effectively a Dungeons & Dragons game, albeit with more guns. So what I thought I was going to do today is take a look at the 6 classes from the game, and we're going to try and make them using published Wizards of the Coast content to try and bring in these classes as classes for your Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game. Because who knows, you might have a group of 6 players who love bum jokes and just desperately want to play these classes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch these trailers for the first times demonstrating the classes. I've then found a breakdown of all the classes and I'm just going to discuss my thoughts about how you can bring them into your game. So this first video is the Graveborn and Spore Warden. I already have some ideas on this and I'm just going to chat as I see things. So my understanding is guns and magic and occasionally swords and melee, which is a bit different, but you know, pretty cool. No, I like it. I think it looks fun.
Rituals, you need look no further than the Graveborn.
Okay.
Graveborn are
Necromancer
high
wizard.
risk, high reward, trading damage for health. Pay the blood price and unlock devastating dark power.
So sacrifice 20% of current health to deal dark magic damage to all nearby enemies. I don't think there's really anything in Dungeons & Dragons that you can do to reduce your health to do damage. Interesting, because frankly, in a lot of RPGs, at least traditional video game RPGs, seems to be the case that you can do exactly that. So for example, Divinity Original Sin, you can make a blood sacrifice to gain adrenaline, I think, which effectively just boosts all your stats. Maybe it's because this would be easily counteracted by D&D being a party game. You often have a support or a healer, but either way, an interesting take and something we're going to have to think about and work out whether there is any way to do this in Rules as Raw.
Plus, they've got themselves a cute little demi-lich. Could be cursed. Who can say? Spore Wardens are your classic nature lovers. Of course, to love nature, sometimes you have
Circle of Sports Druid. That's what this is with.
Nature.
Ooh.
What I'm saying is not all nature is good, except for this handsome fellow. Meet your trusty sidekick.
Okay, this is...
Should foes abound in endless numbers, you can always blow them away. No, get it? Because they're frost you know.
Ranger? Multi-class with a Circle of Spores Druid, maybe?
Did I mention that if you multi-class, you can have double pets? It's true. Welcome to the Wonderlands.
Okay, cool. My gut reaction there is fun. I think this looks really, really enjoyable. And I can see, at least for the case of the Spore Warden, a really, really easy way to do this with published material from Wizards of the Coast. So as I was mentioning, immediately Circle of Spores Druid covers 2 things. 1, mushrooms, which... yeah, that's definitely a thing that's going on. Second thing, that ice magic. Blizzard. Well, I think the Circle of Spores Druid, or at least Druids in general, get access to the 4th level spell Ice Storm, which will go a little bit of a way to emulating that class balance between sort of fungal magic and ice magic. However, I'd also want to multi-class that with a Beastmaster Ranger, because while there aren't any challenge rating sort of half or quarter beasts which are fungal, I'm sure you could frankly ask your DM nicely if you could reflavor, I don't know, a wolf to be slightly fuzzy, and by fuzzy I mean covered in spores. So really that goes away a long way to cover the basics. And I just want to have a quick look at the website, because there's actually a class profile on here. So okay, Mushroom Companion, yeah, we've already seen that. Class feat, that's this Mushroom Companion. They're accompanied by a Mushroom Companion that targets nearby enemies and deals poison damage. Just ask your DM to be nice on that front. And then we've got action skills, Barrage. Fatemaker summons an ethereal bow, firing 7 arrows that deal ability damage on impact. Cool. Ways we can go around that, just, grab a few ranger spells here and there, and actually you can then flavor your arrows to do elemental damage. Pretty cool. And Blizzard, we've already established that's just Ice Storm, the 4th level druid spell. Yeah, these are effectively all just ranger traits and Circle of Spores druid traits. I think, honestly, that will actually do us really, really easily here. Now, the other class is slightly more difficult. That was that Necromancer, which we saw first. Now, there's a few issues here. So, Lifesteal is something we can get around quite easily. There's a few spells that should get us around that. The issue I have is Dire Sacrifice. There are currently, as far as I'm aware, and correct me if I'm wrong, no spells which reduce your health in order to deal damage. I would argue there should be, as I sort of alluded to earlier, because I think that it adds a nice element to play. It's risk and reward, really, which is something I think D&D combat is actually missing to some extent. So while we can't necessarily get around this issue of sacrificing your life in order to do damage, if you wanted, you could take life transference, which allows you to heal someone by losing your health. It's, I guess, a slightly more supporty version of this class. A few things I would do, though. Necromancer Wizard, make sure you take the 3rd level spell, Vampiric Touch. That's going to be an easy way of getting some life still up. And then 2 options with regards to this demi-lich skull which follows you around. One, you could just summon some undead when you get to high enough level, or find a way to learn Find Familiar. And once you've learned Find Familiar, you can just make a demonic skull follow you around, because why wouldn't you want that? And once again, really, really easy class. Double checking the website, the Graveborn Demi-Lich Companion, we've already chatted about that. Dire Sacrifice, Reaper of Bones, which is basically makes you lose health as you heal. We're kind of there, at least you can gain health. Maximum health increase, kill skill. And once again, I think that's just a really, really easy translation over. Okay, so that's the first 2 classes, the Graveborn and Spore Warden, both of which look pretty enjoyable. On to the next 2, which I think I have a gut reaction as to the way we're going to make these classes to brew them up, just based on their names, the Stabbomancer and Brr-zerker.
Perhaps you fancy your hand at stabbing.
I'm loving these traps. It feels very D&D.
Specifically, how do I stab that guy?
Sneaky nose, Daddy.
Mayhaps by tossing out an ethereal psychic ghost sword? Stabbomancers are all about creating and capitalizing.
Easy peasy.
The Brr-zerker is for you.
Okay, cool. Feral Surge.
Smash it! See something else? Smash that!
It's just every martial class in D&D ever.
Unleash your frosty fury on foe after foe. Honestly, that's therapeutic. That's just a taste of what we've got in store for you.
So, looks pretty cathartic to me. I will go so far as to say, actually the guns here look far more enjoyable than the guns I've been seeing in sort of older Borderlands games. This looks fun. You've got snowball launchers, you've got more traditional fantasy weapons. It looks great. Anyway, the classes. Start with the first one, because I think the first one is going to be the easiest, isn't going to need any multi-classing whatsoever. The first was the Stabbomancer, which, frankly, if you were to ask your gran to describe the playstyle of a rogue, I think that's probably what they go for. But it seems faintly magic-y, at which point the immediate response I would have is Arcane Trickster Rogue. So let's have a look at the actual abilities and these class feats, action skills, and we can work out whether that is a good assumption and whether there's anything else we actually need to add, any particular spells we should be choosing. So their class feat is called Dirty Fighting. Critical hit chances increase. Okay, cool. That's effectively just the rogue backstab when flanked or surrounded. No flanking in 5e. Action skills. Ghost Blade. Fatemaker throws out a Ghost Blade, which spins in place at target location, dealing melee damage periodically to nearby enemies based on the Fatemaker's equipped melee weapon. Pressing the action skill button while it's active causes it to teleport to a targeted location and reduce. Cool. And then from the shadows, you enter stealth, turning invisible. Okay, so there's 2 things going on here. One is firing off blades. Okay, I have an idea on that front. Effectively creating an AoE, an area which an enemy doesn't want to pass through because they'll take slashing damage or piercing damage. The second is this turning invisible and also having higher critical hit chance. Awesome. How would I go about this? Well, first thing you need to do, take Rogue. Next thing you need to do is choose the archetype Arcane Trickster. At that point, 2-second level spells that you're going to need to grab. Invisibility, cool. And also, I would go with Cloud of Daggers. It's probably the closest thing you can get to that blade, which stays in place. And as a spell, what it does is it creates a 5 foot by 5 foot area, 5 foot cube, inside which enemies take 4d6 damage, I think off the top of my head. Maybe wrong, might be 3d6. Admittedly, you can't move it from place to place. What you could do is recast it. It's a concentration spell, lasts up to 1 minute. With regards to the rest of the feeling of that class, you want a maximum critical hit damage. I just maintain specking into Rogue. But yeah, that's the first one. That's easy. The second, this Brr-zerker, is definitely going to have to be a multi-class. Now, what kind of multi-class is a different kettle of fish? There's one thing I heard them mention, and that's, this Rage of the Ancients thing, which is an action skill. It causes the character, the Fate Maker, to become enraged, adding bonus frost damage to their attacks. Enraged duration will not deplete while an action skill is active, and ends if the Fate Maker enters Save Your Soul, which I assume is the down state that we've seen before. So there's two things here. The first is to leap towards the target, dealing frost damage. The second is to spin, dealing frost damage. Now, this ice damage, obviously, unless we use a wild magic barbarian, we're not going to have any magic, and that won't necessarily be cold. So there's two options. Either we could go for what I would call a cold sorcerer, take the careful meta magic, but there's not that many sorcerer ice spells. What I would do is actually go for an evocation wizard. Now, this is Rogue. I don't think many people would advise pairing a wizard with a barbarian. Whether it's viable or not doesn't really matter. If you take evocation wizard, how I would go about that Dreadwind action is 2 parts. I would first of all cast Investiture of Ice on myself, concentration up to 10 minutes. What this does is gives you immunity to cold damage, and then cast Ice Storm located on yourself. What does that do? Well, in simple terms, what that's going to do is do 4d6 cold damage to any creature which is within a 20-foot radius of you instantaneously, assuming they fail a con save. And on top of that, also take 2d8 bludgeoning damage, which I could say you could probably argue with your DM is from you slapping them about a bit. That's that, really. If you want to do this without homebrewing anything, you're going to have to multi-class as a wizard and a barbarian, or maybe a cold sorcerer and a barbarian. But I'd say that this isn't sitting particularly easy as opposed to what is effectively an Arcane Trickster Rogue, the Necromancer Wizard, which we saw earlier, which is still a bit funky, and actually that Circle of Spores Druid crossed with a Beastmaster Ranger. Here's the last two, the Clawbringer and Spellshot.
So go on and get your adventuring boots on.
I love this enemy design.
Class. If it's magic you fancy, the Spellshot's for you. She pairs the mystic art of wizardry with the regular art of bullets. Armed with 2 fistfuls of spells, you'll rain down fire, ice, and all the grey hells.
Twin spell meta magic.
Or you can just turn them into escape.
Brilliant. Love it.
But if it's a hammer in you're after...
Okay, yeah. My immediate instinct there, dealing with this Spellshot, is that it's just a sorcerer. I don't know what description necessarily. Looking there, the kind of spells that are popping off, the first one seemed like poison, but thereafter, they're a bit fiery. In which case, Draconic Bloodline. We'll come back to that in a minute, see what happens.
But if it's a hammer in you're after, a hammer in you shall get. Clawbringers come from a proud and ancient order of warriors. But more importantly, they've got a cute wee dragon who follows them everywhere. With one mighty blow, they can clear out a room quick as you like. Cool. Or hurl their hammer like a vengeful god. Best part is when they pull it, it comes flying back. Woo! Love that part. But that's just a peek at the many delights that await you. Come on!
I'm going to start with the last one, the Clawbringer, because I think this is the most interesting with regards to actually piecing it together, because immediately what it looks like is a paladin. Obviously, they're basically smiting with a hammer. standard paladin stuff. But there's something else there, which is this recall weapon, which there's no way to go about that as a paladin unless you take it as a magic item. What I would actually do here is roll as an artificer. For two reasons. One, you can still get access to Branding Smite as an Artificer as a second level spell. It does 2d6 radiant damage. It's just smiting. Now, it also fits an Artificer quite well to have a hammer, and the hammer that we're looking at in this particular trailer, if we go back a little bit, looks a little bit steampunky. At least it's sort of got flames coming out the back of it. So I think you could argue it's an Artificer. And then as an Artificer, you could take the item infusion returning weapon, which would mean that you can throw your hammer and have it come back a la Mjolnir. So I think that works pretty well. If you then chose Battlesmith particularly, you could also get away with having a tiny metal drake hanging about with you in the form of your Steel Defender. So if you weren't a fan of that though, what I'd do is I'd go Paladin, you get to keep that smite, have an Artificer in your party to give you the returning weapon infusion, and then also multi-class into Drake Warden Ranger, which will give you access to a tiny little Drake buddy. Either way, I think the Artificer is the way to go there. On that final class, this 6th class, the Spellshot. As I said earlier, I'm thinking that's a sorcerer. So Spellshot. Class information, spell weaving is their class feat. Casting a spell, reloading weapon grants the Spellshot a stack of spell weaving, increasing spell damage. That's automatically decay after a few seconds. Casting a repeating spell has a chance to award additional spell weaving. So, action skills, polymorph. Cool, that is just the polymorph spell. And then ambidextrous is just that you can equip spells. Cool. Yeah, meta magics wise, you could also go with taking something like Spell Sniper as a feat, because de facto this class seems to actually be about maintaining spell damage at range. Generally speaking, I think this game looks really, really quite enjoyable, but there's one thing I will say, and that is that I think there is a little bit of a lack of creativity with regards to the classes we're seeing here, and that they can very, very easily be manufactured from D&D classes with a little bit of knowledge of a few of the more recent subclasses. Anyway, I hope that if you are planning to put together a fantastical fantasy adventure in D&D 5th edition, this has been somewhat helpful to you. I've enjoyed just watching the trailers, to be honest. Anyway, next week we will be back to proper homebrew, because there are not any more D&D games coming out, and I will see you then. I've been Sam, this has been Roll Together RPG. You should subscribe if you want to see more Dungeon Brews or catch up with our actual plays, and I will see you next weekend, you wonderful, wonderful people.